Good evening. How are you? Good afternoon, rather. And welcome to Your Doula for Grief. I am Bonnie Gonzalez, and yes, I am your doula for grief. Here to support you as you navigate that road, that path of grief. I'm here to hold the light and to walk with you. And just letting you know that grief is caused by loss, and we suffer myriad of losses in our lives, and not necessarily the big mother of all, which is death, but there are other forms of losses that we encounter. um, Loss of relationships, loss of jobs, loss of just hopes and dreams. And a loss is something that you experience, be it expected or unexpected, that changes your life, and not being able to go back to the way it was before this event occurred. So welcome, and know that grief is a part of our lives. Grief is a part of the human experience, and that's what I'm here for, to get us to talk about grief, to get us to share our feelings and emotions and what's going on when we're in that state. Just removing it, that it's no longer a taboo. And I just want to take a moment right now to say that I know with all that's going on in the world, especially the Ukraine and Russia crises, that we're all feeling that grief. So I just want you today to take the very best care of yourself. Grieving can be exhausting. So make sure you're getting rest. Make sure you're doing what needs to be done, staying hydrated, not having so many things on your plate that has to be done. So just taking the very best care of yourself. That's how we can help move mankind and our situation forward. And so with that said, I'm just super excited to have our theme today of befriending grief. And I have a very special guest that is going to help us uncover that befriending of grief and walking with it, inviting it in. And my guest is Reverend Ryan Pulley. Rev Ryan is a graduate of Holmes Institute and the School of Spiritual Leadership, and co-founder / director of Soul Evolution Collaborative. They hold an undergrad degree in religion and philosophy with a minor in ethics, as well as a master's degree and clinical license in psychology, with an emphasis on grief, loss, trauma-informed care. Ryan brings both a spiritual and psychological understanding to ministry and program development. Their passion for the science of mind teaching informs both their clinical practice and ministry, with the intention of individual transformation and communal evolution. So help me welcome Reverend Ryan to the show.
Hello, great to be here.
Hello. Loving that background that you have.
Oh,
So, yes. And loving your background, reading your bio, loving that part of you as well. So thank you for being here. And I just want to just dive right into the topic of befriending grief. And if you want to just share with us just how you became interested and what guided you to grief and loss.
Well, as you read, most of my professional career has been in this area of grief and loss. And I think, for me, it's one of those experiences that is individual, but yet it's universal. And so it can all kind of relate to what it means to experience loss. I mean, we throughout our day, we do this. I mean, it's this constant experience of loss and integration. And so for me, I think that my main reason for really diving into this topic is I think that societally we're socialized to like avoid this, or we're really uncomfortable with expressions of grief, especially in other people. And so, I love this theme for today, like befriending grief. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it is when we invite these experiences into our lives that we can really um, kind of see what they have to teach us. And I know in the moment that doesn't sound easy,
Mm,
but it really is guiding us. Every experience that we have in our lives um, informs us. It informs who we are, and it informs this process we call life. And so, for me, just exploring these areas of loss, these areas that people don't really like to talk about, and how can we make this language normal, or how can we make it, like you said, taking the taboo out of it? How can we
yeah.
normalize not only this expression, but like actually talking about it? Um,
Mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
so I think for me, that's kind of what has guided my path, and not only for me, but journeying with others as well.
Right. Yes. And I know we talked briefly offline that we both have that experience of coming from hospice care, hospice and palliative care. And I wonder, in your experience, did that I want to use the word intrigue, but did that really stimulate you to start studying grief and loss when you were doing hospice work? Or was it the other way around, that you were really interested in death and dying and the process, that's what led you to hospice care?
I think for me, I think my interest came before my work in
Mm,
hospice care. A lot of my graduate work and graduate research was around end of life care and hospice care. And I really wanted to, for me, create a space, create a container where people could show up as they were,
mhm.
whatever they were in their process, and just be held. Um,
Yeah.
and I think, when I started with this idea that I had to do the right thing, say the right thing, be the right person in order to make a difference.
Mm,
But when instead what I learned was this just powerful presence. It's like being present, not only with my own emotions, but being present with others. Sometimes that's the most healing aspect of grief work, especially from a clinical sort of scenario, or even a ministry sort of angle. Just being present, and I
mhm,
think that when we are able to sit in our own um, darkness sometimes, and get comfortable with that, then we can sit with others in their darkness, and not have to turn on the lights and make everything better, but just
mhm.
able to be comfortable and present, not only with our own stuff, but with others as well.
Wow.
And so I think wanting to be able to do that really kind of informed my, I'll say, leap in hospice care, because it was a leap. I had no idea what I was doing when I started. Um,
Yeah.
but just was a beautiful experience of just learning from the experiences of others.
Hmm. Yes. I see that we have a viewer that I think her name was Deb. Could you put that up again, Shad? And she's studying to be a death doula. Yeah, I'm going to take this as a sign. I was currently studying to be a death doula.
Yeah,
Yeah,
powerful work, powerful work.
it is. And I feel that I, like you, Rev Ryan, had an interest in this before I actually became a hospice and palliative care nurse. It felt like the path opened for um, what my calling was. The path opened for me to follow that. And I love so much what you said about just being present. I feel that that's a really instrumental part of being able to discuss grief. It's just to be present.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, especially in training clinicians that I've been in charge of training, or even doing the grief facilitator program that I've done for CSL. I think sometimes we think that we have to have the right answers, or to fix it, or say the right things, or if I just put in the right formula, and then I'll get the right answer, whether it's for our own experience or for the experience of others. And I think that I wish it worked that way, but it doesn't. I think that just being present, leaning into those experiences, oftentimes leading into maybe some uncomfortable experiences, and understanding is when we lean in, we can see the things that are behind them. We can see the maybe the underlying beliefs or underlying thoughts, or these patterns that maybe rise to the surface, that our experiences of grief give us an opportunity to look at. And that's hard. But I think, as fellow humans, we're kind of charged with journeying with each other in this process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And would you say, and I think you alluded to that, so many times people, when I've asked them afterwards what prevented them, they will come and say, I so regret not doing X, Y, and Z. And they always come back with, I didn't know what to say. I was afraid I would make it worse. We're not allowed to be in that mode of being just silent. There's something about silence. Mm-hmm. We're thinking that if we're with someone, we need to be saying something, we need to be doing something, we need to be maybe massaging their feet. Sometimes just being with that person, even in silence, can be so healing. Have you had experiences of, I'm going to say, encouraging people to be in silence, or how do you encourage one to be with someone that isn't?
I think we are, conditioned oftentimes. Well, we hate silence. Especially like if you've ever been like in a group setting, especially in like a group discussion or even a support group, and then there's that moment of like silence, and you're like, okay, this is awkward. I need to be saying something. So I think, being okay with silence and being kind of stepping into this idea of being present. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I think it takes a little practice. It takes a little practice to do that, I think. As a clinician and as a therapist, in part of my professional life, I had to get comfortable with those silences, because I think what happens is we try to fill this space with answers. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, and usually it's our own answers to the other person's problem or challenge, or however we perceive it. But in that moment of silence, if we just let it be, then those things within themselves, those insights, those things that are just wanting to be birthed in them, can actually have space to actually do that. And so I think for me, I have learned that to really lean into the silence, maybe even a few seconds more than I think is comfortable, just allowing that space and creating that container for that individual, and sometimes for myself, to be more receptive.
Yes. I agree with that. I feel that by having that silence, I call it giving it the space for what's underneath to bubble up. And I'm finding that the longer I am in silence and can be with that when conversation or when questions arrive, they're really from a deeper level and can be so soul stirring and satisfying.
Yeah.
In a sense. Yeah. And I love that you say we're just not conditioned that way to be comfortable with silence. And do you have classes that you're teaching classes?
Well, right now, I did develop the Grief Circles program for CSL. So I wrote the curriculum, and so right now I'm actually teaching a class to train facilitators. So these are individuals that will take this curriculum and this program back to their individual communities, whether it's CSL communities, whether it's their communities at large. And so really helping individuals navigate
Mhm.
this experience. And we know that there's not a one size fits all. And so there's not a one way fits all. And so this program really allows participants to kind of like settle into their own experience,
Mhm.
comparing it to others, because we like to compare stuff and we like to say, oh, I'm not doing it right. Maybe I'm not doing it like that person, or it doesn't look like that. So it's really, I think these circles, and I'm grateful for CSL for their commitment to this program, is really creating this container
Yeah.
for people to slip into. And I said, we experienced loss in many different avenues of our life, and I mean, in the past 2 years has really highlighted collective grief, this
Mm.
collective
Yes.
experience of grief. And so I think it's really important, especially as new thought folk, to really hold the banner for that, to create these spaces for people to come and show up authentically. We have this idea that when we show up in spiritual communities or even groups like this, we have to show up in our Sunday best or everything all put together. But being able to create these circles that really allow people to show up as they are,
Mhm.
it really just invites, so far, just this amazing authenticity and vulnerability, and the sense of belonging,
Mhm.
which I think is valuable in this conversation about grief and how we navigate this.
Yes. Are you surprised by the number of people that have expressed interest in learning through your program around grief?
I'm it's one of those things, when I spent quite a bit of time writing it, and then when people actually started participating, I'm like, oh man, this is actually a real thing. It's happening. Things are doing stuff. And so, I guess I'm surprised, and then I'm not, because it's
Mhm.
interesting, because I think this was an idea whose time had come. And so
Yes.
when we just allow it to be, then things unfold as they will. But I'm always happy to be surprised. It's always fun to be
Yes.
surprised. But it's kind of one of those things, you kind of step into the flow, and things present themselves. Individuals present themselves, and I just think it's been
Mhm.
um, just a wonderful opportunity.
Mhm.
Myself too, even leading some of these sessions, I'm like, wow, I've learned so much from so many of the participants. It's been quite amazing.
Yeah. We have a question from our beautiful Laura Topper, who's asking, how can we make it safe to cry in our communities? How can we make it safe to cry in our communities?
Yeah, that's a good question, Laura. I think that for me, how we create these spaces that are safe for us to show up authentically, and when I think about these outward expressions of emotion, or these outward expressions of grief and loss, and they look as different as any of us. But I think when we create these spaces and we model these spaces where we show up authentically, then we automatically invite others to show up that way as well.
Mhm.
Whether that is, those outward expressions of grief, whether those are being able to share deep hurts or losses that maybe had not been shared before. Um, I don't think that we can go wrong, especially as leaders, or people who are in our community. I don't think we can go wrong with showing up and modeling that authenticity.
Mhm.
Because when I see someone else do it, I'm like, oh, thank goodness, now I can show up as my authentic self too. I don't have to be put together. And so for me,
Mhm.
that's the general answer, and
Right.
what I've seen.
Right. And I would just like to add to that, or just dovetail to that, that if we show up, we that are visible or vocal in our communities, in our places of worship, if we show up in that truly state of being vulnerable and allowing what we feel to show, that just encourages, it encourages someone else, as you said, to say, yes, oh, she's doing, okay, then, yeah, I could do that. Bonnie's doing that. Oh, Reverend Ryan is, okay, let me do that. Let me try that on. And also encouraging other people just through your silence can encourage somebody
Yes.
to to be honest in what they're feeling. And I just wanted to ask, because we're saying befriending grief, what is the gift of befriending grief? What is one of the gifts of befriending grief?
Oh, I think there are many gifts. I think, I kind of, it's kind of like befriending that person that you never thought you needed. Until you've done it, or you're like, oh my God, there's no way I ever thought I could be friends with that person. It is really like that. For me, I think it's not being afraid of asking the questions. It's not being afraid to look at those aspects, those things that come up. And we know when we experience loss or grief around a specific circumstance or event, we know often it brings up layered stuff underneath.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it is constantly being curious as things rise to the surface. Often, in my own experiences of loss, I have had the immediate experience and this reaction to it. And then I would have these other reactions. And I'm like, what is that about?
Mm-hmm.
And when I continue to ask the question, I wonder what that's about. As I continued to look at those areas that kind of came in my face as a result of this experience, it began to reveal to me these default ways of seeing things, these default patterns, or these patterns that once served me that no longer serve me, but I have just been running like in autopilot mode and hadn't really looked at it until now, until I'm in this crisis. And oftentimes when we're in crisis, we look in directions in order to make sense of it, or to make meaning of it. And so for me, befriending grief, befriending this experience does not mean I have to be like, yay, this is wonderful, this is amazing. Because we know even in friendships, we have our ups and downs.
Yeah.
But in befriending, we ask more questions of, we look more closely at.
Mm-hmm.
And, as we become friends with people, that's how we get to know them. And then we get to know more and more, and the things that they can teach us. And so it's the same experience. It's not saying, oh, I'm going to befriend grief, I'm going to love every aspect of this. Some of the aspects really suck.
Yes.
They really do.
That's part of
I never want to create this language that is invalidating or devaluing that experience, or the trauma of some of these experiences, but just understanding that grief does serve a purpose. It's our natural way of navigating this experience we call life. And sometimes that's uncomfortable, and that's okay. And it's okay. Sometimes we just have to sit in it for a minute, and that's okay. And I think for me, that's befriending grief. It's asking the questions. It's uncovering these things underneath. And sometimes that's not fun. I'm not going to lie, it's not fun. But on the other side, as so often is the experience, on the other side, we look back and say, oh, yes, that was it. That was the reason, or that pointed me in this direction or that direction.
Yes. And also looking at grief, it allows you to, as you said, look deeper into yourself, and to see your own resilience. Because of that, I found out I could do X, Y, and Z. And you're so right. I'm not here saying that grief, it's your buddy, let's go. But just like a buddy, they can step on your toe or trip you up. It's like, oh, I didn't mean to hurt you, but it's a part of the process. And I also feel having a different perspective of grief can alleviate some of the suffering. So many people that I've interacted with they're suffering because they're afraid to look at that grief in the face. So it causes them even more internal suffering.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. And I think, sometimes, especially in New Thought teachings, I mean, we do have this language around, we turn our energy and I turn our attention, to those things that we want to experience in our lives. And I think, we have the tagline, change your thinking, change your life.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we don't experience these things. It doesn't mean that we don't look to lean in to the things that are uncomfortable, lean into these areas that are being revealed to us. Because I think it's when we lean in
Mm-hmm.
that we can actually see these old frameworks that we've kind of built our house on. And when we lean into that, then we can shift our perspective and then step into a new way and step into a new experience. And so I think, we don't want to bypass the challenges of life and the just dirt and grime, the effects, as we would call it. We don't want to turn away from the effects per se.
Yes.
We want to be aware of them, be aware of how this shows up.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to be so far removed in our spirituality that we can't see it for what it is, because then we become so I don't know, disconnected from our experiences, disconnected from others. And so to use our language, our spirituality as a way to lean in, and a way to, when we lean in and it's uncomfortable, and as humans, we are conditioned and our bodies are conditioned to avoid discomfort. But this spiritual life that we ascribe to gives us that foundation so that we can lean in.
Yes.
Lean in with a knowledge that we're going to gain something out of it, out of this leaning in, and even if it's uncomfortable in the moment.
Yes. And we had a person that just had a comment up. Her name was Deb Love. Can you put that up again? Okay. People are scared they will stay in the grief if they start the process.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, I felt that too. You ever been in those experiences where you haven't been able to express your emotions? You're like, oh my God, if I express it, I'll never stop. And I had a wise colleague of mine say, if you're in that situation where you're afraid, give yourself a time limit. So, today I'm going to spend 10 minutes and I'm just going to be able to kind of sit in this emotion or sit in that emotion. And tomorrow, another 10 minutes, and tomorrow, another 10 minutes, because it kind of gives these boundaries.
Yes. Oh, I can't believe that we're at time here, Brett. You're going to have to come back. We're going to have to continue this discussion, because I did want to delve into that. People avoiding really their emotions because they're afraid they'll be pulled under and never come out and never surface again. And also with New Thought, change your thinking, change your life. It comes with work. And that's when you need to reach out to your Rev, reach out to a practitioner, reach out for group support, reach out for I'm your doula for grief, offering you private grief coaching and group coaching as well.
Yes.
So I just so appreciate you, and just want everyone to check the website. This has just gone by so fast that I'm ready to stay on and record the next program. Oh, but thank you so much for joining us today. And please go to the Soul Evolution collaborative. Soul Evolution Collaborative.
Soul Evolution Collaborative, yes.
Yes, it's a great website. Great meditations, great information. Please join. And as I said, please be gentle with yourself moving through the grief process. Reach out for help. Don't do this alone. Grief is to be shared, and it can be. So thank you. And until next week, goodbye. Thank you, Brett Bryan.
Thank you so much.